Thank you all for joining us, mentors and students alike. I think we're going to start with Sneh and then go reverse geographic order from latest to earliest, if that works for everybody.
Yeah. So for the UX writing interviews, I think so. The first question which always comes is, tell me about yourself and tell me about your journey, right? How did you venture into UX writing? That's the first question any interviewer wants to know. So always remember to have behind it what led you to the UX writing part, and what inspired you to go there. So always have a story, always think around why did you move into this field. That's a very critical question which the interviewer wants to understand, that if you're coming into this field, which is quite new, how much passion do you have for that field, right? They want to evaluate you on the passion and evaluate you first on the passion. Will you be able to give in, and will you be able to change their products or their business with your words? How will you impact that? So that's the first thing that will come, that will be head on asked. So prepare for that. And a little bit background about yourself, starting with that. That's a very basic question, which I think so the panel will agree that that comes along, that comes our way always. Like, why UX writing, and why did you choose this field, and what is the most interesting part about your job, right? So that's a very critical question, which first even with the cohorts or in the mentorship, I always ask this question: why did you want to do this? So this is quite a critical question that the interviewers ask, and I think so. More than the skills, they want to first judge your passion, and that's one question. Then the second question, which I have faced after interviewing, I don't know how many times and how many rounds of interviews, I feel is the idea, the skill part. They always ask me a question which I've seen most of them: what is the difference between voice and tone? That comes like, do you know the basics, at least the basics of UX writing? What will happen if you have like a double negative or something like that? And then you have certain things in the interview. You might have like just not one round, maybe 3 to 4 rounds. And it will start with the normal hiring manager round, then there'll be a portfolio round, and then there might be a design session or maybe a content design session where they will give you a problem statement to solve, or maybe some screens they will share with you and they'll ask you to change it. So something like around that, and then maybe a values round or HR round. So these are the typical rounds which you will have in an interview. Anyone would like to add on it?
I'd just like to say that's a great rundown, and I wish I would have had some of this insight when I was exploring my career transition. I kind of went into a cold, and I remember that first interview I had. One question that was actually really difficult for me to think about on the spot was like, what was one project that you had where it started one way, then you had to change and kind of turn on a dime and adjust all of a sudden. And they're actually just like trying to explore like how I'd work within a cross-functional environment and how I would just be nimble and flexible with the project. And so I think it's important to think about situations like that as well, no matter what career you're coming from as you're exploring UX writing. Is, think about those cross-functional situations that you've been involved with in the past. Think about your impact in those projects, and if you have any specific data that you can bring out with what you contributed, that can help as well, because I think that helps a lot in the interview process. But really, UX writing and just UX work in general is just all about working with other people and being collaborative and being flexible when needed, because even in my current job, I'm constantly facing like changing requirements and deadlines that move around. So you kind of have to be a person who's able to handle those things on the fly. So yeah, I would definitely suggest, think about a situation that you've worked with someone in the past where the goal changed like mid-project and what you did to adjust to that situation. And I think that was one question that stood out for me. And then also just about, I wouldn't get too worried about specific like writing skills or things like that. Like, I think it's mostly about being a good person in the interview and thinking about your story, like what was mentioned earlier, but just being truthful and being yourself and just like being calm and collected throughout the interview process. I think that goes a long way. And most of the time, if you're at the point of an in-person interview, they're just looking to see what kind of thinker you are and also what kind of teammate you might be within an environment that you'll be brought into. So I think about those things when you're in the interview process.
I would like to add to Andrew that yes, they want to think about your process. Like, what is your writing process? How do you take the projects which will come in? Do you take it in a step? Do you just take it like each project as its own, or you have the same process for all the projects? So they want to learn about how do you design content when it is given to you. How do you solve that problem? So what are the processes you follow? So maybe because it's in design also, they have certain processes as well. So we can think around design processes and how do they do the content design part into it. So I think so. And you rightly pointed me out that they want to look at your process, how you're thinking around the process, and that's very critical in an interview. Like, if you're explaining your portfolio, you have to show why you did this, right? Rather than first you explain what was the problem, then you explain why you did it, what was the problem, what was your goal, why you did that, and what was the outcome. So that's something that these are 4 points. When you are explaining your portfolio, you can put these 4 points and explain it to the interviewer.
Yeah, absolutely, Sneh. And just to add on to that, it's great that you all are in this program because you're really nailing down those UX foundations. And so many people who come into the UX writing world come from journalism, copywriting, technical writing, like all of these different writing backgrounds. So being able to show interviewers or just like your potential team that you understand UX design basics, maybe have like some experience or knowledge of UX research, being able to point to methodologies that maybe you use in your portfolio, all of that's really strong and shows that, as Sneh said, your process is thought out and it's UX oriented. It's not just I'm a writer and I wrote this. Anything you can do to make sure that you emphasize how user-centered your decisions are, I think that's crucial.
And you said something, Alice, that is really important, is that we all come from different backgrounds. And something that I've seen in many people who started working UX writing is this kind of imposter syndrome, because we come from different backgrounds. We all have this where we just, as you said, we were working in journalism. I know some people who were working in research and in different fields. And so we come to the interview with this idea like, I've never done that properly, like I've never landed that job before. So who am I to just apply? No, that's actually a strength. And I think it's something that's really important to understand when you come with this imposter syndrome. It's just actually you have more strength than other people because you can have some doubts, but in a constructive way. Like, these are all your strengths. Everything that comes from a different background is actually a different perspective. It gives you a different angle and it allows you to empathize with a different type of people that will be probably your target or your users or any type of people you can empathize with. And I think it's a huge strength to understand when you start working in UX generally.
Yeah, and understanding
well
any
said.
problem statement. Yeah, go ahead, and
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. So I think so. What I've realized in the many interviews I've done, I think so, it's the first part is to empathize with the user and just understand who the user is, and then go forward and then solve the problem. If you're given the problem statements, suppose you're given a task to take home, take home task, because that's also a part of clearing the interview. How do you do that? So understand why, what is the user trying to do, try to create an empathy around it, have an empathy map around it where you think around what is the user's goal, what are the user's need, what situation are they, and then try to bring that in, and then it will flow. Then provide the solution. I think providing solution is the easiest part, but thinking through this is in those tasks, I think so it's very important.
And that's also probably why, as you were saying before, like being able to explain your design rationale, like your logic behind everything you do is really important, because we know, and I think as you're doing the training, you all know now that there's no final answer, like there's no absolute answer to everything we're creating. And that's because we have many users, we have many personas, we have many angles. And so the only thing that matters is being to understand why you choose to do what you do, and just being okay with that, because it's logical in the way you have it. It's not just because it's pretty, or it's actually bringing a solution with a specific angle, and you're able to explain that. And doing so, I think it could be a good argument for recruiters, because they will see how you think with the user in mind and with the target in mind, and how you can explain that and explain your choices.
Yep, Axel. And often something that comes up in real life is constraints, whether that's from your business side or from your developers, where you come up with an excellent idea and it's just not possible. If and that's something that I'm sure will come up in your portfolio for one reason or another. You'll realize like, okay, here's an idea, but it wouldn't work for this reason. That's something that you can also emphasize, because it shows flexibility and the ability to kind of pivot and react when things come up, which is every day. I'm sure your product managers or designers or whoever's interviewing would be happy to see something that you did in reaction to a constraint.
Yeah, that's great. No, all these answers have been fantastic. I was just looking at the chat actually and saw some good questions coming in. I was going to tackle one here about red flags to be aware of when interviewing from Elaine. And that's a great question. And actually, whenever I've interviewed, I've actually been really big on boundaries, especially as a remote employee now. I want to know, like, when I'm off, am I truly off, or are there fire drills? And so I'll kind of ask questions related to that, like, what is the pace of life here? What are you like as a manager? If I'm talking to the hiring manager, like, what are you like as a manager? How demanding are you? Things like that. It's kind of what are the expectations within the job, and kind of how fast-paced or untraditional the job may be. And maybe you have different tastes. Maybe you like that lifestyle where you don't mind working late at night or really early in the morning. But I'm coming from the perspective of someone who really enjoys kind of a more traditional lifestyle, because I used to work nights and weekends a lot. So that's what I'm interested in, is just having a job kind of fit what I want in life. And so those are the red flags I'm looking out for. Does it not align with what I want in my life? Because jobs are important and our careers are important, and it's good to be ambitious. But I also think in order to be good at your job, you need to be a happy person and be passionate about what you're doing. And so if your job is wearing you down, if your boss is wearing you down, if coworkers are wearing you down, like, that's a bad thing. And so most of the time I'm looking for a personal connection with even teammates or potential teammates I'm interviewing with during the interview process. Usually you'll interview with like other content writers as well, or UX designers or product managers. So in those one-on-one interviews, I'll be searching for just a personal connection to see how easy they're to talk to and how easy they're to get along with and things like that. So yeah, it's just all about trying to find that personality fit, I feel like, and they're looking for the same thing as a company. But I think you have to enter the interview process as a prospect of just being like, I'm gonna interview these people as well. It's a two-way street. I want this job to align with what I want in my life, and I'll be productive in the best way possible if that happens. So those are some of the red flags I look out for anyway.
There's an oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well said. So we've had a lot more mentors showing up than I expected, which is great. So I think some other people are going to jump in here. Bala, would you like to add something?
Hi, everybody. My name is Bala. I'm currently a UX writer at justeattakeaway.com. I work in Berlin. I just wanted to add on to Andrew's point. There were good ones, and especially with respect to red flags. This is something I personally try to pay attention to even before I apply. Like, for example, when you're looking at a job description and when you see what their expectations are, I think even at that point you will be able to tell, like, if they're expecting too much, if they're defined the position too broadly, which will in turn mean that they may not know what the exact role of a UX writer is. I wouldn't say don't apply to these roles, but I would say apply. And when you have a sit down with them and when you have an opportunity to chat with them, challenge these and tell them, hey, or at least try and understand the rationale behind why they're doing it this way. Why do they have the UX writer taking care of localization, for example, or helping with
social media?
Yeah, yeah, or I don't know, product documentation, because these are very thin lines that can be blurred, and some companies do tend to do it. It may become very taxing at one point, depending on the volume of work you have. So that is something I would definitely pay attention to before jumping in.
Yeah, because the roles are not very clear, not well defined. So they think that it's a writer's role. It's not a UX writer's role. So they consider it's a writer. It's just as a fancy thing, which is a UX in front of them. So you have to ensure that when you're talking to the company, ask them, what is your UX writing process? I generally start with that. Like, how do you design content right now? That's my first question to the company. And I have a list of questions which I keep. And I ask them, what is the process? Why are you hiring me? Why do you need me now? What will you do with me? Right? What will I bring to the table? Right? And these are some questions I always ask, and I try to get more information out of them. And so that is my way of getting away with the red flags. What product I'm working, that's also what product, if I come in, what product will I work? What will be my working hours, and all those things I also ask.
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think there is one that I also like to ask, and that could answer another question that was asked by Callum. It's that for me, it's interesting to ask what is their process, if they have one, because sometimes it's the first time they hire a UX writer. So hence, that's why it's important to ask, why do they need a UX writer and what do they think a UX writer is? And I think it's important to ask, what is their process and how do they think the UX writer is or should be integrated in their overall process? Because sometimes they will expect you to just come at the end of the process and you will just be there to read and correct and proofread and rewrite. And this can become a red flag because that's not your role. And sometimes it's also because they need to be taught. They don't know actually how that could best work and when you can actually take place in the processes. And that's why I think sometimes it can be hard to make your voice heard within the design team, because sometimes, yeah, as the example was shared by Callum, sometimes you can make a proposition for a copy and finally it will not lead anywhere because you haven't been heard. And it's only, I think, a matter of process because you need to let them know how, as a UX writer, you can have a different perspective as a general writer. So can be complicated, but it's not something that is a dead end. It's just something that needs communicating and that needs to be worked with the teams globally.
That's great. I think I'll just jump in with another question I saw here from Irene about how did you find your first role in UX when you started from a non-tech role? That's a great question. I think it goes to a lot about how you unlock the whole mystery behind the interview process and getting an interview in general. I've had the most success in my career in journalism as well, and plus UX, of knowing people within a company before I was interviewed. So my UX role, it was really interesting how it began. I was in my second layoff in 3 years in journalism. I wanted out of the journalism world, just more stability. So I was trying to find any writing related role. And I had a friend socially who was a product manager at a tech company here in Atlanta. He knew I was looking for a writing related role. And he's like, hey, we have this UX content strategist opening. And I'm like, what's a UX content strategist? I think I had to Google what UX meant at the time. I was at ground level. I just had no idea, but it was a really small company. And they're looking to add, I think, their third writer to the team at the time. And so it was kind of the perfect marriage of timing and circumstance. And I think a lot of life is that, is timing and circumstance and having connections that allow opportunities to come about. So anyway, having his voice within that company as I applied for the job allowed me to get an interview with the hiring manager. And he was a well-respected employee. So I think like that really helped me a lot go through the interview process and eventually get the job. And I was so thankful now looking back on it that I entered that company, and it was a great way to kind of cut my teeth in the UX world, make a lot of mistakes too early on and just learn the job, because I was kind of learning the job on the fly. I didn't have a course like this or any kind of introduction to what UX writing was. So it was completely like learning about it as I was doing it, which was an interesting way to go. But I don't think that would have happened at all if I would have applied for a UX content strategist job at another company or somewhere where I didn't know the product manager. So I think it helps a lot if you're able to know what the landscape looks like out there. If you have a friend or someone you know socially inside a company that you're interested in, and then they can let you know about job openings, and then referrals go a long way in the tech world. We're hiring for jobs right now, actually, and my managers told me, hey, you know of anyone? I tell them to apply. So I mean, that's how a lot of this works, is referrals, and they go a long way. So I'd say just be a curious, interesting person who is passionate about this industry, and make as many connections as you can, and see where those lead you, because they could open doors that you didn't even think were possible to be open.
Mine was quite different. So I was doing a job. So I will just combine the portfolio and the how to get your foot in the door in UX writing. So I prepared a portfolio which had a little bit of journalism in it, and I did a few screens and explained the process, what went through it. And when the HR asks you for a portfolio and you don't have it, always remember that you can say that, just give me some time, I'll prepare it, and maybe I can apply on it. So it's a very quick solution to it. Just ask for time and then go back and prepare whatever you know and whatever you have done here. You can do the task. Write a nice description. What was the goal? What was the problem? What was the goal? How did you solve it? And before and after kind of a thing. So if you do that, that would solve the portfolio part. Just ask for more time. When I was applying, I did the same thing, because in the beginning, I didn't have a portfolio like everybody in the world, it's their first time. And I applied through many jobs. I failed, so don't fear failure. You will not get the first job. You might not just get the first job, so don't worry. Just keep on it. Have that determination that you have to clear it, because once you start giving the interview, you realize, oh, these are the questions they ask me. In the first interview, you might be like, okay, these are the questions they are giving me. How is that? Maybe you go back home, then you study a little bit. Oh, I would have answered them this or that. So don't fear that, don't fear failures, and go there, have a great time, have a great conversation about user experience and what will you bring to the table. So have that confidence. And I think so before getting my first job as a UX writer, I had 3 to 4 failures, but since you're preparing the course, you will be well prepared, not like me, but it helped me to get an idea what was the industry like and what that was my experience.
All right, so there's a question about portfolios, and I think I think a lot of people will be interested in that. Ashton is a mentor from a previous cohort, and I think he has some info for us here.
Hey guys, nice to meet you all. Never really done this before, just kind of always keep my camera off and mentor in the shadows. But when I saw the portfolio question, like I couldn't help but jump in. So really quick background about myself. I'm a UX designer who Yuval actually converted. I took this course to sharpen my microcopy, and the fulfillment I got in kind of creating, I don't know, a dialogue between users was just way more fulfilling than just working on Figma and building design flows. And from the course, I applied to a few jobs and I always got asked about the portfolio. And by the way, I'm still a UX writer. I work for Melio right now, and I consult for IBM in their hiring of content designers. So one thing I can say is the portfolio isn't actually that important. And I know I come off a little bit, I don't know if it's arrogant or I really don't know how to describe it, but I can tell you right now, it isn't important because this is an up and coming role. There's actually the one question I get asked all the time, even from recruiters who are trying to steal me away from the company I'm at now. When they ask for portfolio, I always tell them like, I don't have one. Like, this is a new gig. UX writing is still very young. When would I have time to create this portfolio? Like, this is a ridiculous question. Instead, I ask them for the homework. Send me your assignment. Let me work on it. And I fire back with questions. I never let them get the upper hand or scare. Like, don't be afraid to scare the recruiter or the interviewer. Like, come at them. Why is this role open? What made you interested in content design? How experienced are your designers with content designers? Right away, jump in as if you're already getting the job. And this is from my perspective. I'm really sorry if it sounds scatterbrained. I just had a late cup of coffee, so I'll try to piece it together. But in the places I found success in not having a portfolio, it's always returning the questions, like firing right back. I want to know why they want a UX designer. I want to know why they need it. How experienced is their team working with one? Because from Wix to Melio, I find myself constantly fighting the design team because they don't know how to work with a content designer. So these questions are super important. And through the questions, you can kind of manufacture what they need, what they want. And as soon as you get the assignment, like I know from experience from working with so many incredible writers, because I don't have a writing background. My writing background is strictly UX Writing Hub, which is scary that I've been a UX writer now for 2.5 years, and this is my only experience in writing. But the homework, like from what I've seen, and even when I'm assisting and consulting at IBM and picking content designers, is that it's so important to kind of understand where the user is coming from, where they are, how they'll interact with the product, and take that, use that as your portfolio, save the homework. Like I save all the assignments I've ever done, and that's my portfolio. So if they ask for a portfolio, don't be afraid to say you don't have one. Instead, build off of what they send you. You can even tell them that. You can tell them, I want the assignment, I want to do it, and I'm going to add it to my portfolio. And it's a great starting point. In my opinion, it's a great starting point.
Great ideas, Ashley.
I can actually, yeah, I agree with you, Ashton, and I think it can depend on the countries, but mainly, as you were saying, it's still the beginning of UX writing, and if you don't have a portfolio, it's not that bad, really. It's good if you have one because it can show a lot of things and you can talk about a lot of things, but it's not necessary. Go for it.
It also doesn't have to be like really fancy or, you know, it doesn't have to have all these animations or anything. When I made my portfolio, I think I stayed up for 2 nights over my little Squarespace site, and I used some copywriting examples, but I had one UX example. It was from like Atlanta's public transit app. And I just did a case study, and it was like absolute, it was not pretty. But, you know, as long as you just have something small, you can walk someone through it, show your process, and that does the trick. Like, that's the purpose.
It's all about
Yeah.
showing off your process. I think so in the interview, in the portfolio, everywhere they want to just see the process. So the process should be clear. So there's a question around the UX designer title. So UX designer and UX writer are two different roles. Just to tell you, a designer is somebody who is working on the screens and the writer is working on the copies simultaneously. So if you are a UX writer, don't apply. I would say if you are interested in design, if you know the tools, you can of course apply on it. But UX writer would be a totally different role. I would say they are miles apart right now. So they fall in the same team, same domain, but they're quite different.
Yeah, that would. So yeah, to Deborah's question. Yeah, just the we in the course you are doing some mock-ups and wireframes, but they are generally very low fidelity. So a designer is going to be doing much higher fidelity stuff, but you do have to make sure that you apply to content design roles, and it can get a little confusing with all the different names and terminology. But they generally, when they're those are not visual design roles; those are writing roles. So you can look for UX writing and content design roles. They're generally the same, basically the same requirements. I just kind of did some research on it a few months ago. So don't let the titles fool you too much.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting. There are content designer roles that are more marketing roles too out there. So depending on what you want, maybe that's what you want too. But if you want like a UX role, kind of think about that, like what was mentioned earlier, and do some exploration about what team you'll be working within and who you'll be reporting to, if that person's a content marketer or a marketing manager or something, or if it's a UX person, because there are some job titles out there that are just called a content designer, but they're actually working within the marketing department. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, there was another question someone raised. I lost it in the feed, but should we be wary of jobs that want you to seem to want you to do marketing or some other kinds of writing?
I could jump on this one if you want quickly, because when I was working in Renault, I was working directly with the marketing team, because at first I was the first UX writer and they had no idea what a UX writer was, and it was kind of an in-between job, just writing for marketing, writing for user experience, writing for designers. It was a bit of everything because I was just a writer. It's not that you should be skeptical, it's just that you should ask yourself if it is something you want to do or not. I agreed with that job because I knew that they would ask me to work with the marketing team, and that was okay for me. But I don't think it's necessarily a red flag. It's just some companies will be bigger and they will have the possibility to hire a UX writer and write specific writers. You can have a tech writer and different type of writers. But some other companies will be smaller or have smaller teams, and they will just hire someone to do a bit of everything. So it just, I think, depends on what you want to do and what is okay for you. It can be interesting because it can help you diversifying also your different skills and be able to write for different reasons. But just be sure that it's something that you want to do, because it's very different. Writing for marketing and within marketing constraints is not the same as writing in a UX user experience kind of view.
Even I started like that, Alex. I was a UX writer and I was handling the design team content, whether it was social media for them or writing blogs for them and editing blogs for them. So in the first job, I chose a little bit of kind of a compromise. I did a little bit of compromise there, but it's your choice. And I was getting that job that time. The market was not open as it is right now when I started off, and only a few opportunities here and there in India, and that was one. It was for Zeta, and I started with that. I was doing social media management as well as writing blogs and doing UX writing as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it can be a good place to start if you're trying to launch your UX writing career. But I will say, I think that that can indicate that a company doesn't really have a strong UX program or a strong understanding of UX in general. And if you want to be doing UX writing, that to me translates into a lot of labor being put on you to convince folks to give you a seat at the table to make content design decisions. And I might just make sure I ask extra questions to feel confident that they are ready to hire a true UX writer or content designer.
All right. Let's see. There was a question that stood out to me. Olga asked, how important is it to be able to use various tools as opposed to learning them on the fly? Anybody want to take a crack at that one?
I can start with this. I think at the basic level, we may be expected to know the fundamentals of a tool, but I don't think not knowing a tool will ever be detrimental towards you being hired for that position. You can always be honest about it. You can tell them that you can learn and it should be okay. And these tools are, especially from a UX writing perspective, that you may not need to learn them in such depth as a designer would. So it's very easy to learn them on the fly. I would also say, I know that we get introduced to quite a few tools during the course itself here at UX Writing Hub. So that could be a good start. You can just build upon that learnings that you have, try some stuff on your own, and see how the basic things work. There are tutorials out there and LinkedIn courses. That level of learning should be enough, I think.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that's a great answer. And tools change on the job all the time too. I came from my previous companies using Figma. Now we're using Framer, which is less popular, I think, than Figma. But you're just constantly having to learn new tools sometimes on the job. So just have an open mind. It can be fun to learn new things too, but don't get too scared if you don't know how to use a certain tool, or don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to learn a certain tool. Like your company, if they hire you, they'll want to invest in you and give you the space to learn something and give you opportunities to get comfortable with tools. So yeah, just be flexible when it comes to the various tools out there.
And I think you made a fair point about the space for growth. Because as we all know, it's a growing field we're working in, and we're all learning while doing it. It's continuously expanding, and we're learning new tools. There's new stuff going on every day, and just if the company doesn't understand that you need space for growth, it could be a red flag. But normally they would understand, as you're in a niche field, that you are learning stuff all the time, and we all are. And that makes you a great professional too, actually.
Okay, so we can run overtime. It's fine with me. We're set till 7, but we can go as long as everyone wants. But I want to bring up one question, which Carla, who couldn't be here at this hour, but she kind of initiated this whole thing. She asked, I forget how she phrased it. If an interviewer asks you, do you think you have enough product experience? How do you answer that one? Yes, Harita is not a mentor. She is a student in the January cohort, but she's had a number of interviews lately, and I've had the pleasure of talking to her about that and seeing some of her really excellent work that she's done. And I think she'll have some insights for us.
Yeah, I have been in a gazillion interviews. I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating for comedy reasons, but I have been in enough interviews to sort of have a template now of what do's and don'ts for every interview, questions that I can anticipate for all of the rounds, and there's certain things that I keep in mind. But coming back to the point in terms of experience, this is something that I received this question a couple of times. Sometimes I was the one to be questioning the companies and their job description, because they would be mentioning something as absurd as 6 years of experience, or 8 years of experience for a mid-level role. And then I'm like, how serious are you about this, and how are you measuring it? So a little bit about my background, because it's contextually related. I studied UX. I worked as a UX researcher for a year with Hostelworld, and then after that, I worked as a UX writer for a fintech company called Uphold for another year. So it's essentially like, if you look at it strictly speaking, I only have 1 year's worth of experience as a UX writer. So when I have these companies questioning me, I apply to companies regardless of the number of years of experience that they usually mention. You want someone with 3 or 4 years of 4 years of experience. I ignore that. I apply, and when I get through, I usually go like, I would say that it would be a bit of to try and measure what I've done in my experience in terms of something as traditional as number of years of experience would not do me any justice, and would not do any of my work any justice, because truth be told, for example, the sort of companies that I worked at, I was their first UX researcher and I was their first UX writer. So I wasn't just putting my head down and focusing on the writing stuff that I had to do. I had to initiate processes from the ground up for me to be able to do my job as a researcher or a writer. I also had to double up as an educator and a mentor to all of my colleagues, trying to explain them what is my job, how do I go about it, when should you involve me on the process, and including like initiating like a UX writing process or design process. So if you look at the number of years of experience I've had, it's only 1 year's worth. But then if you look at the amount of work I've actually done and the quality I've delivered, how do you size that up? So I would actually try to turn this around on the person asking me this question, that is it fair to be measuring my experience just in terms of the number of years, and how that actually adds up to what I'm doing on the field and in the job. That's all I wanted to say about this particular question.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, anybody else want to tackle that product question? Axel, Elise, Sneh?
Well, I think that there is a good answer in the chat. Someone said, I use projects all the time. And that's definitely a good one. We always use projects all the time. So it's just, yeah, you can even if you don't think that you know projects really well, you can spend, I don't know, like a week paying attention to what you use and how do you use them, and how the way they are crafted makes you use them. And being conscious of the way you use the products can help you come with that answer. I use projects all the time and I understand them. And that could be a great starting point to also an interesting kind of conversation, I think.
Yeah, similarly, like today I was trying to upload some documents and it was saying, something like, expired the limit, and I know that they could have written a good error message for me. I was frustrated. And I know that product is bad, right? The experience is bad. And what kind of the product, you can just talk about the products you love, so you can talk about that. Like, I have product experience. I like this product. I like that product. So I have a varied experience of products. So don't underestimate yourself, which I think so Harita clearly pointed out, that as a writer, when you're first person in the job, you do a lot of things. You make the voice and tone, and you are a fighter, you are a evangelist, and do all those things. And the year of experience does not count. Like, even I have 2 years of experience, but I've done I've built a Figma plugin. I've done done a whole, I think so 2 companies I've made like voice and tone charts, and these takes years and years built. But we have done that job in just a span of such small time. So we are building those experience. And always remember, when you have zero experience, you'll always have some kind of experience. Products. You're using Google, you're using Zoom, you're using all those, and we are living in a digital world. So don't like, these questions are a little stupid. Like, sometimes interviewer have these, they think that, okay, I can ask this person anything even if I don't know. So you have to judge that question and be like, okay, that's not the right question. I would counter it like that. So ask them about, what is your vision, what is your goal, how are you thinking to communicate between, what product goals do you have, right? What is your product mission, vision? Ask about that business. How much do you have the understanding of the business? Like, so ask, counter them.
Honestly, whenever I'm about to get into an interview, what I do is I not memorize, but I thoroughly go over the job description, and I pay attention to the terminologies that they're using in describing the goals and the objectives. That we want you to do this, do this, do this. I make sure to remember those keywords, and I sort of very generously sprinkle it in my answers. Okay, so you want someone to be able to create a tone or style guideline. Oh, I've done this in my previous company and I initiated this process. Or if you want someone to do a lot of testing, or I in my previous company, I created a guidelines on the do's and don'ts of A/B tests, and I initiated a lot of qualitative testing, and essentially like remembering the keywords from the job description, and sort of this first and foremost establishes a good impression that you did your research and you did your reading, and then using that with them, it's also like a bit of a psychological trick that makes them go like, like they have a checklist. They're like, okay, this person has dealt with this and this, and this person can move on to the next round of the interview. So memorizing, in a way, being very thoroughly aware of the job description has helped me, has propelled me into several rounds of the interview stages.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Axel.
I was saying that there is a question that was asked by Elaine Rose that seems really interesting.
Yeah.
How can you advocate for yourself when interviewers don't take the time to look at your portfolio or resume? That's, I mean, if they let you come into an interview, I would presume that they took the time to take a look at your resume. At least I'd hope for. Other than that, I think one of the best things that you could do is tell your story, because you're recruited as a person, and what the company needs is also to understand how, as a person, you can come and bring something different in the company. And something that we see now is that UX writing is a lot about inclusivity, diversity, and all of that, because we all want to advocate for inclusivity and all of those concepts that we all fight for in our products every time when we write, in the research that we make, and everything. And telling your story and telling the recruiters how everything that you've done has led you to UX writing could be interesting. And of course, empathizing on what your personal story could bring to the table, I think, because even if they have not seen your portfolio or your resume, honestly, when I interview people, I don't care about the portfolio. I just take an overall look, but I don't really care. I'm talking to a person and I want to know about the person, because this is someone that will be between a whole team of stakeholders. Like, as a UX writer, you're working with a lot of people. I think one of the main role that you're going to feel is just collaborating and being able to temper everything and everyone. So I'm more interested as who you could be and who you are and what you bring at the table as a person, that your portfolio. And if they haven't taken a look at your resume, tell them your story. That's only my point of view.
And when I tell my story, what I do is that I go from just very it's like a trick. What I do is I start like what I'm doing presently, and then go backwards, so that it shows like, right now I'm this person, I'm doing this job, and I'm doing this, and these are my roles. And then it's like there is a star, I think so, You just talk about what is your role here, what are the responsibilities here, what you did here, and then move backwards so that the first part is registered very clearly, and then you go back and try to keep it like just like a minute or 2 minute short or 3 minute short, at least the first introduction where they ask you, can you tell me about yourself? And just don't talk about the work, talk about your personality, what you like, what you don't like, and how you have, why did you move into this space? So something around that, because when we start telling stories, sometimes we might just miss out, it can go lengthy, but you should just try to do it in the first 5 minutes and then move ahead, right?
All right, sounds good. I think we'll get wrapping up. Any one quick last question anybody want to put out there, or final comments? By the way, I think what we'll do is we'll take some of the questions that were asked here in the chat that maybe we didn't get to, and we'll bring them like in some kind of document or in the Slack groups or something. We can continue the conversation that way.
Also, I just wanted to put this out there real quick. Like I said, I have been interviewing a lot, and what I've done is for every interview that I am about to participate in, I usually prepare a Google Doc, and in that Google Doc, I have a set of questions which I predict that the interviewer might ask, and I have bullet points so that I'm well prepared, and I just don't end up rambling during the actual interview, and I keep it short. So if anyone wants, I can share that Google Doc with you guys. And I also have a story toolbox that I prepared, because many times what I find helpful is that when someone's asking you a question about, okay, what is your greatest weakness or what is your greatest strength? Instead of just giving a couple of words like, oh yeah, my greatest weakness is not staying organized. Instead, what really helped make an impression is by giving an example, a real life example. Or, in my previous company, I did this and I had this issue, and this is how I ended up solving it. So having a bit of a stories toolbox, which talks about like examples of what is like, like what major challenges and problems you face, how did you solve them, what is your greatest strength and weakness, what was the biggest accomplishment in your position. So all of that, so I can share all of that information for anyone who wants, and yeah, we can discuss about that. Just hit me up.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Sounds like a good resource. All right, well, I think we should probably get wrapping it up. Thank you to all the mentors and everyone who's participated. And I guess we'll see you next time. Any questions? Like, I think we'll get some conversation going in the Slack group. Okay.
I think so. It was from Irene. Is there anything that you wish you could do differently to get here where you? No, I don't think so. I am happy with my failures. I'm happy with my wounds. I'm happy with everything, because it's a learning part. So right now I have 3 offers, and I'm still in between jobs. And there was a time when I interviewed for all these 3 companies, and these 3 companies rejected me. So I have it takes time to learn. And I'm really happy that I learned, and then I came to these companies, and I'm picking and choosing the jobs. So it's good. It's good to have those failures. It's good to have interviews which you're not able to crack, because once you don't, you will be like, oh shit, I could have said that, in the interview, or oh, I knew it, I forgot it. So maybe that comes up in this next interview. So don't worry about that. I think so Harita has done a great job with preparing a list. Even I have a list of questions, which I just look over before going into an interview, because these are very general questions which they ask. So yeah. So I'll share it to Harita, and Harita, you have the list. You can just put in there. Most of them will be the same. And then, so that's my thing. What about you, Alex?
No, I agree, honestly. It's just, I had an example like that when I think it was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. I had an an interview for a company that I really liked, and everything went well until like the third step, where I think I kind of fucked it up for some reason. And so I was mad. I was mad at myself because it was really something that I wanted to have. Like, this job was really nice, the company was really nice, the people seemed really nice, and it was a really, really nice opportunity. But in the end, I just learned, because they told me what was the reason they didn't went further with me, and I learned. And like 4 months after that, well, I landed another interview with another company that was even better than this one, and I had a chance to correct my mistake, and I did better, and I had the job. So it's just, I think you can always find reasons to wish things would have been different, but you can also see how things can be in the future, because you're learning every time. And we're in a field that is always building itself, always evolving, with new products, with new best how-to and all of that, best practices. So just, yeah, don't be too perfectionist and be yourself.
Just brush
Yeah, I
off
think-
yourself and get up and then go for another interview. Like, just be like that. Be that person.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I think that's definitely the approach that you have to take. It's not about the ones you miss, it's about the one that you do get.
Yeah. So it will take time. It's a slow process, but it comes there. It will come there. Just stick on this. Right. Last question for the list is, if I get rejected. No. You can apply again. You can apply, I think so, a couple of times. It's not a problem. If you are applying for a company, it's not a problem. Just see your resume. If it's ATS friendly, there's a app called Resume Worded. You can just put your resumes there and see how your resume is working. I think so. It's a website where you can just upload your resume and see where you're making mistakes, or it is ATS friendly or not.
All right, everybody. So I think we better wrap it up now. We're past time, but I've collected all the questions, and anything that we missed, we'll try and answer on Slack. And good luck out there. Just be consistent, keep at it. And, you know, I found being with this course now for 3 years, like the students that really apply themselves and really just stick to it eventually do find jobs. So the field is growing. There's a lot of opportunity. So keep at it, and you'll definitely get there.
Thanks a lot, Aaron.
All right.
Thank
you, everybody.
And all the best.
Bye.
Bye, bye.
Bye.